Hello, everyone. I'm joined by Kellex from ENCE to talk about everything about the Stockholm Major. But before we get into all that, I thought I'd start you off with a nice, easy one, Kellex. And I was just wondering, have you managed to solve the situation in Ukraine yet? Are you getting chased out of there?
I'm not sure how much I can comment on that, but no, he's somewhere else right now. But
Okay.
I don't think we will see him in Stockholm, but I'm hopeful there's a chance.
Has it really changed how much playtime you would have got anyway? Realistically, with where the meta is right now, or would we have been looking at a mostly Vestola World anyway?
I think it would most likely still have been Vestola, but it's hard to say for sure without the data. Maybe he would have gotten more playtime, but it's looking like a Mauga meta, so it was probably going to be Ves all along.
And I want to ask as well, because from what I understand, Wmaimone is coming with you as well. Wmaimone will be available if you need him. How much Wmaimone are we likely to see at this event?
I think if we're starting to struggle with our current roster, he might see some more playtime if we want to do some cheese comps or anything like that, but I don't think we'll see him at all.
And then I want to ask as well, because obviously there's been a lot of talk about all the teams boot camping as well, but I feel like your boot camps maybe slid under the radar a little bit, right? You're all in Finland right now. Are you at the ENCE facility?
Yeah, we are in Helsinki right now. But
How's the
yeah,
boot camp been?
it's been great. We had one day that was maybe a bit rough because we had to do some ends content early in the morning. But I think it was my first time here. The guys were here last time as well, but I've really enjoyed it. I think it's a good little experience just to group each other up before an event.
And then am I right in thinking you're still coachless as well for this event?
Yeah, I mean, Chase has been coaching us a bit from his phone whenever he had the time, but yeah. But it's been easier to work without a coach when you're all in the same room because it's easy just to
Hmm.
look at a replay real quick and go over it and talk about individual stuff. But yeah, still coachless.
When I talked to you before stage 4, we had a sort of similar conversation and you felt like you're actually getting on okay with a coach. Now you've had a more extended period of time without a coach. Is there anything that sort of crept into like sort of problems you have now or have had more recently that you didn't have at the start?
I wouldn't say we've had any like special problems or anything. It's just more. It's always nice to have that person in the spectator that can always point out stuff that you don't necessarily see when you're playing yourself. Um, and again, that might be some decisions that we would have to make, but it would be really nice to have a coach that could make that specific decision. But I don't think there's anything like really terrible going on. Like even though we don't have a coach, it's just been pretty smooth.
I was thinking as well, maybe one of the hardest things that would come without a coach when you've got like a more than 5 person roster is you talked maybe about like, oh, if things aren't going well, maybe it's time to hit the Wmaimone button as well, you know? Normally that would be a coach's decision. Is there a person in the team who would sort of make that call for the team, or would it just sort of be, I guess, a democracy, a collective effort of,
Yeah, I think it's mostly a collective effort. I think if something is really going wrong and we need something fresh to like start over, I think we can all point it out easily by ourselves. But it's always nice to have that coach. But I don't think we've had that problem yet. And again, it could have happened, but so far it's that we haven't had really have any trouble with anything. So yeah, it's just team talking together about it.
coming together, solving problems?
Yeah.
Wholesome. Then I want to ask about the meta as well, because I've been talking to all the teams, and very much it feels like we're going to get pretty much a mostly Mauga Juno Brig look for most teams in most places. Lots of people talking about lots of Reaper Echo and those type of heroes that we maybe see a bit more in Brawl. How do you feel, or how do you feel this meta suits your team?
I mean, according to our previous scrim results, I think it's actually going quite well. I do want to say, I don't know if anyone else has said this in an interview, but this meta seems very RNG. There's a lot of big old fights, 5 volts versus 5 volts, and sometimes you win them, sometimes you lose them. You can always try and optimize it. But like the last week has been really great for us, I think. So I'm not really too worried about it. I just really think if you have a good day and you show up, then you can actually win the whole thing. And I think that goes for our team and lots of the other teams as well. It can go either way. It just depends on who plays really good that day and has some luck.
Whenever you get these situations or these metas where it's like 10 ult fights become a pretty common thing, then it becomes a real sort of like, if you win that fight, it doesn't just win you one fight, it can like snowball you like
Yeah,
2 or 3 fights in the future. So if you win those important fights, it means like it can really shift the momentum of like a map or a series quite a lot.
yeah. We have seen that multiple times in scrim. If you screw up one ult, you can like if you screw up a Uno ult or something and they don't have it, like you can snowball the whole map. They're gonna cap with 4 minutes on King's Row, and then it's almost unwinnable for that specific map, and it can go both ways. You can win miraculously, you can lose like really terribly. Like it feels so RNG. Obviously, that's like a macro aspect to the whole thing, but sometimes some bad stuff just happens, and that's just how it goes.
Well, yeah, there's like you want your decision making to be as perfect as possible, but all it takes is maybe you don't hear the Reaper one time, the Blossom goes off when you don't expect it, and then all of a sudden everything falls apart.
I have to rally a fight, I get stuck in the cage, I can't bash the Reaper, it kills my whole team, we use 5. Oh, well, go next fight, guys. And then, you're like, you need a miracle next fight, you need someone to flank and clutch. Yeah, it's a very interesting meta, but, we will see what happens. I'm confident we can take it all the way, but again, we just have to show up on the day and see what happens.
And then I want to ask a little bit as well, because one question that sort of comes up for a few teams is it seems to be leaning more towards, I guess, more of a double flex DPS style. And certain teams obviously just have multiple players they can put in for this role, including yourself. But do you feel there's much of a room for any hit scan in this meta, or are we going to see Kai having to sort of flex around a lot more?
I don't want to sit here and like tell you about all our comps, but I think we do play hit scan on some maps, and I think other teams do as well. Maybe not as often, but there's a few maps where we can pull it off. But yeah, he will most likely just swap between the Reaper. Maybe he will go hit scan on some maps. But I really think on maybe 80% of the maps it will be Reaper Echo or Reaper Genji, something like that.
Yeah, well, to be fair to Kai as well, he does have a history of it. He played it for us back in the World Cup in 2019 as well, and he's actually played a few of these metas, and he's always done very well on that hero to his credit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Reaper is a hit scan, right? So
if anything, it's easier. You're closer to the opponents all the time anyway. You can't miss.
And there's a big fat Mauga in your face. You can't. Easy.
And then I wanted to ask about your role as well, because we talked about it a little bit in Stage 4 and how it's like quite a tricky role in those type of comps. Do you feel the Brig role has changed much as we've made the shift from Orisa to Mauga?
I mean, I wouldn't say too much has changed. It's just you just have to look at different things compared to when it was mostly Orisa. Like you have to bash off the Orisa. This time you have to bash the Reaper. You have to dodge cage. Same style where you're brawling a lot, and you really have to find a way to min-max everything. Shield the Reaper. You have to block for your Mauga. Shield the enemy Mauga from healing. Like all these small little things that can really change a fight. You have to be really aware of that, and just try your best to min-max it so you can get the advantage. Because as I said, this meta is so RNG heavy that all these tiny little things, they can really carry over and snowball a whole map.
I feel like as well, the bits I've seen of this meta so far, it really feels like, especially the Brig ult maybe in particular, has changed a little bit more. Like when we see the Brig ult maybe in like Ana Brig type mirrors, it's almost quite simple to use of like, they're priming us, they're nanoing us, let's rally and live, make sure we get away.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, there's now a lot more things to worry about in terms of like, how much can I really swing? How much do I need to shield? Can I shield the right person at the right time, A bit more like almost like a tank.
It's very circumstantial. You have to really be creative with it. It's like if they have a cage and a repull, you have to play to dodge the cage and bash the repull. If you only have rally as your own ult and you need a miracle, you can go on a flank and try and do something, or if you have 5 ults versus 5 ults, you can maybe like start rally or something. You just really have to be creative with it because there's just it's not black and white. It's have to find the way in the gray area.
I think that's what's maybe been most interesting with this meta from what I've seen as well is, I don't know if it's just because it's kind of new in terms of all the teams have swapped to it like within the last couple of weeks, but it feels like compared to like GOAT, which is always the classic example in this type of meta, there's not like a set order to like, we always do this ult combo or we always do this. There's like way more variety in terms of which ults can win which fight if you've got like 2 ults versus 2 ults or 3 versus 3.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to find like a system for it all, so you're always on the same page. Sometimes you just have to improvise on the spot. And I mean, I think you can have a sort of a system, like you always come with these tools together, like Reaper Cage is good, like there's a small system, but it's not a set in stone. You always have to just, like, it's all depending on the situation. They have X ults, we have these ults, we have to do this order, we have to play, like, do this pathing and all this. Like, you have to be really creative about it, except for like maybe the 5 ults fight versus each other. Then 10 men go in and hope for the best.
And then I wanted to ask you about the tournament itself. There's a bit of a sentiment, I think, between a lot of the teams now. Often ENCE do better at LAN. Like there's some kind of step up. Like at the Dallas Major, obviously you went on the team at the time but did very well. similarly at the Esports World Cup, even though they maybe ran into a crazy raccoon situation that can happen, they actually performed quite well.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something about this team that, do you think it's true? Do you perform better at LAN than you maybe do in some of the online tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, it can maybe be ENCE playing better because we have a lot of veterans on the team, but it could also be the fact that maybe the teams they have been playing against, obviously I wasn't there, maybe they get more nervous on stage, like all these small factors can really play a part. And like I'm old, like our DPS players are fairly old, I would say. Our tank players getting there, it's pretty much only Wmaimone and Chase who are not playing, who are fairly young. So like the experience will maybe carry a bit as well. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think even at this point now, Vestola, since the World Cup, he had like a kind of crazy World Cup performance on Sigma.
Yeah.
He's had like good tournaments again since this year. Does seem to be like at least trending that way.
Yeah, just lots of veteran. I think we'll do great. Obviously, we have, if we beat Toronto in the first game, we have Crazy Raccoons, and I'm sure we can take them all the way as well.
I want to ask you about that first game because, again, like sentiment for Toronto is sometimes this isn't always the best meta for them. I imagine you probably not really scrimmed them at all during these boot camps just because you've got them as your first opponent. What are your sort of expectations then going into that match about how strong they'll be?
I mean, I imagine they are probably the strongest American team, so that's that. But again, it's a first to two. A lot of things can happen. I don't really know exactly what's going to happen. I have my ideas on what map they're going to pick. We have talked about it already, but I really think it can go both ways really easily because of the first to two thing. We can cheese the first map win and then, take a 2-0. They can win the first map. So many things can happen in these short games that I cannot really say for sure what's going to happen.
Well, when you talked about the meta as well and how these small things can change the course of a map, the less maps you have in a series, the more those things can be decisive. All it takes.
Especially with the map pool, there's an Ilias in there, there's Gibraltar, for example, and in the other games too. I think Mauga meta will probably be the strongest on most maps, but there is certain maps like Ilias where you can pull off the dive, and maybe they'll play that, and we will have to find an answer to that. And so much can happen on in these short games that they can cheese, we can cheese. We'll see what happens.
I want to ask you as well, because with the exception of Toronto, I imagine you've got the chance to scrim most of the teams as everyone's been over in Europe somewhere or other. What do you feel like the current power level is between the three regions?
I mean, I wish I could give you an answer. It changes day by day because we would scrim one day against both the Korean teams and we would do really well. And then the next day we would lose maybe a block to an American team and go even versus SSG or something. And then, the day after that we would be really good again. I cannot really put them on a tier list because I feel like it can change from today to tomorrow, Nightmare could go ahead and win everything. Like every team has a chance, I think, to go very far in the tournament, depending on the day itself. So, but obviously, I can just sit here and say Korean team's best, European, American, But I think it's there's not a big gap. Maybe between like the worst, not the very bad, but like the worst teams and the best teams. But I think like the middle part are somewhat close to the top.
I think as well, I'm sure you've experienced this in like various metas over your time in Overwatch as well, where like when it becomes almost like these big macro comps and there's a lot of theory, if you're like a day ahead or like one team has changed something about their neutral or their alt game or something, and you've not seen it before or not played against it before, just one adaptation can really put you on the back foot in a series if you've not seen it. And this is why, I think it happened to us on London, we always lose to Toronto going into playoffs, but then we fixed it. We solved the theory, so when we play them again in the real tournament, we're back on top.
Exactly, and that's what I mean with this whole meta, like some team will review something specifically, like, okay, my DPS players, they have to do this every fight, and then the enemy team have never played against that before, and then boom, you're up 1-0 in the series, and especially in the first games, you can snowball a match win right there. It's all about like being ahead because it changes day by day so much. So
I think there's like a huge mental aspect to it as well, right? Because I've experienced it before. I think it happened to us in season 5 playoffs where like we were so confident in that like Reaper, Sojourn, Winston matchup, and then Houston changed something about our neutral, and it just threw us off our entire game. And then we were just like, we couldn't solve it in the moment, and then everything falls apart. We're like second guessing our decisions, and then everything just sort of like snowball out of control really quickly.
Exactly, and it's very important that you're ahead, especially because there's not much time left. That if you get these small advantages, you can just snowball a whole map, a match, like everything. And that's why I think a lot of these teams, they can genuinely win this tournament. Not only the Korean teams like us, SSG, even the American teams as well. Like someone can find something that's really good, and no one will have time to practice against it and like fix it in time, so you can like cheese your way through the whole tournament and almost win.
And then, is there a particular team you're hoping to run into at this event? Like a team you'd particularly like to play or particularly like to beat?
No, I want to play against the Korean teams because I think we have a shot at beating them, and I would really like to showcase that we're not just gonna have a tournament where the Koreans are gonna just chill their way through the whole tournament and just win for free. Because I think if there's any tournament where the non-Korean teams can have a chance at winning, it's this one.
It would be a big one as well, right? End of year tournament, best chance. I mean,
exactly. We're on home turf, kinda. So,
do you think there'll be much of a crowd advantage? I felt like when I was watching Dallas, I was only watching it from at home, but it felt like the crowd was like a bit NA-pilled, you know, but relatively neutral. Do you think there'll be a big crowd swing for maybe the European teams, or maybe particularly like ENCE obviously quite close to home to Sweden?
I don't know because I didn't see the Dallas stage, but I also imagine that the American fans are maybe a bit like more hype about everything. I don't know if there's gonna be that many people in the crowd except for people in the scene, if that makes sense. You know, on social media. So I think it's really hard for me to say. If we were in France or something, then I think we would have the same crowd advantage. But when Sweden, I have no idea because I haven't seen the stage. I don't know how many people is gonna be there. But maybe the thought of that will make the Asian team scared.
Yeah, well, people said at like Esports World Cup, you know, the crowd was pretty Saudi pilled, as you can imagine, and it made it like I remember like Sugar Free and some of the Toronto players saying like, "Oh, they really hated us. Like they were booing everything we did, everything we play." I don't think we'll maybe reach that level, but maybe there's a chance.
I'm hopeful. You know, I've seen so many people tweeting that they're coming. I think it's going to be a great event, but I just have to see everything for myself before I can make a judge it.
All right. Thank you very much, then, Kellex. I appreciate you taking the time. Best of luck to you and the team and safe travels, and I'll see you at the event.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.